she had left me all of the Mother's Day cards that I wrote her through the years. Probably started when I was 7 when I could write, Every single card started with, "Dear Mom, I am so sorry that I'm such a bad child."
Really?
"I'm so sorry that you have to deal with me. I'm so sorry," just apologizing for myself over and over and over in every single card I wrote her. And I just thought to myself, my God, if my child ever felt that she needed to apologize to me for who she was, I have fucking failed.
So let's get on with your story. So you are a stunt woman.
Yes.
Not just a stunt woman, but you're like a super successful stunt woman in Hollywood, right?
I've had a very great career. I've been extremely blessed, and yes, I would say.
Tell me some of the films you've worked on or some of the people that you've doubled for.
I've probably done about 140-something films and television shows. I started in 2004 doubling Uma Thurman. That was my first job.
Uma Thurman?
Yes. Worked with her for about 5 films. Then I met Cameron Diaz, started working with her, doubled her for about 10 years. And in between that was just bouncing around when she wasn't on a movie. Then I started doubling for Amber Heard. I doubled for Taylor Swift. I doubled for Charlize Theron. Pretty much every tall blonde in Hollywood, I would say. There's a few I haven't yet, so there's still, we'll see. And Caitlin Olsen, who is amazing and a dear friend of mine who actually read my audiobook, but yeah.
And what made you pursue this career?
I don't really know. I was a gymnast growing up and a dancer. I danced with Alvin Ailey with their professional program, and it was always, dance and gymnastics was always kind of an outlet for me. I don't think I realized until later in my life as to really why I became a stunt woman and got into the business, because it's definitely something that is rare, and especially as a woman.
It's a hardcore career.
It's a hardcore career.
It takes a certain personality to even think that that's going to be something you want to pursue.
Absolutely.
Tell me about your family. Where'd you grow up and how'd you grow up?
I grew up in Long Island, New York, and my father was a Marine, and he was in Vietnam. He went when he was 18. He grew up in a family with domestic violence, and I think his war was his escape to just get out and do something. So he, I think, went from one war zone to the next. And my mom was one of 6 kids, and her father was a sociopath. And so was her mother.
And that left an impact on your life?
It left a huge impact on my life.
Tell me about that.
So my mother, like I said, was born into one of 6. My grandfather was a sociopath. He was a pedophile. He was a rapist. He was many things that I think I'll probably never really know. My grandmother was his partner in crime, so to speak, I guess. Was very aware of the things that he was doing and either didn't care or just turned a blind eye to it. She was also an abusive woman as well. So my mother and all of her siblings, I believe, I know for a fact that my mother was abused by him her whole life. And then I was born. I'm one of 4 girls. And I started being abused by him at age 3.
How long did this last?
He died when I was 11.
So it was going on until you
Yes.
were 11 years old, and he died.
Yes.
Why do so many kids not say anything when this happens?
It's really interesting because if you read my book, when I wrote my book, I'm in such a different place now. It was really important for me to protect my parents, not speak ill of them or not look to them as being a part of what happened to me or my aunts and uncles. But the truth of the matter is that my mother knew what was going on.
She did.
My mother was completely disassociated from herself, probably from the age that he started molesting her. So my mom was physically there, but she was emotionally completely detached from herself. It was like she just wasn't present with us ever.
Soft White Underbelly is about giving people a space to tell their stories, even when these stories challenge what we think we know. Ground News shows us different perspectives in the media, which is why Ground News is a perfect sponsor for my channel. In a world where algorithms censor much of the information we receive, some of the most important stories get missed from our news feeds. Ground News highlights local news from around the world, giving you an on-the-ground perspective that national coverage might miss. The app and website empowers you to form your own opinions by presenting you with every article published on any news story worldwide. My favorite part of the app is the data it gives you on each news source as you read it, such as where it leans on the political spectrum, a factuality rating indicating how subjective their printed reporting tends to be, and who funds it. I particularly like their blind spot feed, dedicated to showing you news stories that are underrepresented in the mainstream media. You can check this all out by scanning the QR code on screen or clicking the link below. It's easy to forget how much bias can shape the reality we live in. And in a world where our attention is constantly being fought over, my Vantage Plan easily helps me keep up with more important stories slipping through the cracks. So I encourage you to check them out at ground.news/SWU. Subscribe through my link or download the mobile app and enter promo code SWU to save 40% off their Vantage Plan. And by subscribing or even gifting it to someone you know, you're helping hold the media accountable and helping my channel directly. Thank you for watching.
Because of all the work that I've done a lot of work with psychedelics in the last 3 years, which has been extremely healing and eye-opening for me. I've recovered so many memories of what happened to me in my childhood. I don't think that I didn't tell my mother. My mother walked in a few times when things were happening to me, and he had groomed everybody to such a level where it was almost like, when I look at it now, like cultish in a sense, of that he had this control over the entire family and nobody questioned him, and what he said was what was going to happen. So,
do you think your dad knew?
My dad was an alcoholic. So, and because he grew up in a really poor family and my mother had money, she was more well off than my father. I wouldn't say they were rich, but she was more well off. My dad loved my grandfather. And I think that when my mother had her memories after my grandfather died, and when I started speaking about the abuse, my father, I think his alcoholism got worse. I think it was terrifying for him to have to look at himself as being a part of something that ruined his children's life. At least at that point, it felt like my life was ruined.
And I'm sure your grandfather would go through social situations and just be like, everything is great, everything's normal. He's just a
well, it was really, my grandfather's story is really interesting, because I think when you have this level of abuse that happens to you, my first memory, or my first real concrete thing that I remembered about my grandfather was he had a basement. They had a basement in their house, and he would take us down there, or we would get sent down there. So when parties and Christmases and things were happening upstairs, the kids, or at least I, was downstairs. And no one ever really came down there except for him. And this memory that started, sort of coming up for me around 14, 15, which was him, on top of me. I was laying on a bar, and he was, his knees were on my arms, and this memory that now I have the full memory, because when they come to you like this, it's like flashes. You can't really make sense of them. It's a little bit here, a little bit there, and psychedelic work helped me be able to uncover everything that happened.
Which psychedelics helped?
So the first journey I did was MDMA only. And then I've probably done about 5. And then I'll do MDMA and mushrooms. And it's sort of Dr. Schwartz, who's very well known in the trauma space, and he is kind of the founder of PARTS work. The way that he explains it is it takes out the protector parts of us. So there's parts that we develop as children to keep us safe. So I developed a part that kept me from remembering certain things because it was too overwhelming. The same thing that happens when you're being abused, right? There's this idea that or how it felt for me, that you're floating over your own body, that you're frozen, you can't move, you don't know what to do, you're completely detached, which is what my mother continued through her life. She was just completely detached from herself. And that's what happened to me that day. And there's so much that I have remembered now, even since my book came out. My grandfather used to carry around a Swiss Army knife. And it was really interesting because I grew up in a very Catholic family. So it was almost like religion was used against us, which is why I struggle a lot with religion now. But it was always, oh, your grandfather is so meticulous, which he was, and he would build these paper airplanes. He was a pilot in World War II, and he would build these model airplanes and these boats, and he would sit there and that's what his knife was for. So he had all of these things. But he used to cut me with it.
How seriously?
Oof. When I remembered this piece, it was like my world fell apart, but also came together at the same time. I have 2 scars inside my mouth from back to front. And it was done, I believe, as a scare tactic. I don't know that there are moments and memories that I have of him where I definitely think that he could have killed me. And I don't know if he chose not to, or I'm not really sure. But
cutting a young girl, no matter what the situation, is demented as can be.
Yes. And that, I think, and he used to play these games with me. When you have a knife and you do this, or you've seen people do that where they'll like put their hand on and they'll do that. He used to do that with my feet. So I have all of these like scars on my feet, like these nicks on my feet.
Where he missed.
That I've been staring at my whole life. And I know where all my scars came from because as a stunt woman, I could say, oh, it was this job, it was this job, but I have had scars in my body that I never questioned because that protector part of me couldn't go there. I wasn't ready to go there. And I think it's been about 2 years now that I'm no contact with my mother. And it's been within those 2 years where I've been able to uncover the darkest parts of what happened to me as a child.
Wow. Has it been helpful for you?
Yes.
It has?
Oh, yeah.
That's great.
I think that when we suffer such extreme abuse as I did, I wanted to hold on to I needed to hold on to my parents as like they didn't know, or this happened to my mom too, which is all true. And she was traumatized and my dad was traumatized, and that's all true. But they still handed me over to my grandfather and allowed this insane abuse to happen to me. And when it was the sexual part for me, there was this part inside of me that could say, well, it's possible they just didn't know, because unless, it's not something you could see outwardly, right? Not bruising or not things. And then when I started remembering about the cutting, I realized this is crazy, that me as a 7-year-old was walking around with these slices in her mouth. I imagine I couldn't eat. I imagine that it was extremely painful. I know how much I was bleeding because I remember. And everybody ignored it. And that was when I realized how bad my abuse was and how I needed to hold everybody accountable and not just him.
Did you have siblings?
Yeah, I had 3 sisters.
And did they go through the same thing?
I don't like to talk about their journeys because they're not mine,
Right.
and in the book I don't even talk about
Okay,
them.
we won't bring it up.
Yeah.
What kind of teenager were you?
Oh, I was extremely, all of the things that you do when you've been abused is exactly what I did. I was promiscuous. I had no self-esteem. I ran away from home. I just didn't really care about myself. I never really saw myself living past 30. I always felt like, I'm going to die at any point. I never saw a future for myself. Future was not something that was in my vocabulary.
This kind of thing really impacts your ability to make decisions
Yes.
in your life, right?
Yes.
You can't just say, oh, I want to be a doctor, a lawyer, actor, stunt woman, whatever. Those thoughts don't even come into your head when you're dealing with this kind of stuff, right?
No, I got into drugs in my 20s for about a year, where I was doing, ecstasy. I never did heroin or anything like that. But I definitely had, a rough patch that I went through. But interestingly enough, there was something, and I do believe that some of us are just born with it. There was something inside of me that I would look at my family. Everybody was drinkers, everybody was smokers, and I just knew that it's not what I wanted for myself. And so probably when I was 22, I stopped drinking altogether, and I didn't drink for probably 10 years. And I sat back and I watched how my family operated and how everyone dealt with the pain that was handed down to us. And it just wasn't something I wanted for myself.
What a gift.
Yeah. And I don't know why that is. I became a cutter myself, which at the time when I was doing it, I thought that, this is just a symptom, or this is just a symptom of the abuse. Like so many people who were abused become cutters. I was bulimic. I had an eating disorder forever. These are just the things we do. But I think my cutting was very connected to my grandfather and very connected to that's how he punished me. And I continued that onto myself because I believed I deserved it. And that's such a huge part of going through something like this, is that you don't think you deserve anything better. I mean, that's your playing field from the time you're 3 years old. There is no, I deserve love, or I deserve to be taken care of, or I deserve someone to look at me other than just like an object. It's just not something that's in your vocabulary. You have to build that.
That's what I've seen in all these interviews I've done with people that are involved in drugs or sex work or whatever, is it kind of derails your ability to say, I deserve something good in my life. I deserve a good partner, job, life, good health, it derails that. And all of a sudden you believe you deserve crap, and you end up on the streets in a tent doing unthinkable things for money.
Yeah.
And it's really remarkable when somebody like you comes along and has the ability to say, this is not for me. That lifestyle is not for me. I'm going to do something different, something better.
Yeah. And I don't know how I did that, actually. I don't think that there's a true answer for it, but I do think that when we do get into drugs and we do get into alcohol, it quiets that fire that we all have. Some of us just have it buried deeper for whatever reason, but we all have it. And so when we're doing that and we're, prostituting ourselves, or, even though I didn't get paid for it, it's like I was not treating my body with respect by any means because I didn't think I deserved it. It's just what we're raised to think that we deserve to have.
It's interesting that this is all happening in the family. This wasn't some stranger who came around. This was somebody that was close to you.
Yeah. Well, 90% of children that are abused by somebody that the family knows, either a family member or somebody that the family knows.
90%.
90%. Protect your children.
I'm not going to ask about your siblings too much, but are they thriving as well as you are? Because I could easily say you are thriving. You're doing well in your career and you're...
Yeah, and the career thing was an interesting one for me because in 2007, I was in the business for about 3 years, and I talk about this in my book in the prologue. I hurt myself really bad on set. I had done a gag and the wire didn't catch me, and I fell on my face, and I had cut my face up pretty bad. And my career was the one thing that my family really held on to, especially my father. It was so proud of me, so proud of look at what you've made for yourself and done for yourself. And there was two sides to that, because when the accident happened, it wasn't looked at in my family, of course, because I'm dealing with traumatized people. It wasn't looked at oh my gosh, Kim, is this a good idea for you to be in this business? Is this a good, this is terrible. Are you okay? It was more she's so awesome. This is so cool, as I have 80 stitches in my face. So I think that how we heal is we cannot be around the people that helped traumatize us, which is what took me a really long time to learn. And it's not something that many people are able to do in their lifetime because they have such a strong attachment to their parents, which is what we're supposed to have, but it's supposed to be a healthy one. And I never had that, and it took me a long time to walk away. But the minute I did was the minute I feel like my inner child felt safe for the first time. I realized anytime I was around, especially my mother, I was in fight or flight all the time, and my nervous system was just all over the place, and I didn't have time to heal myself or even have my own thoughts because they were being just kind of convoluted by the idea of what my mother wanted our family to be. And that was a huge decision. It was really difficult, but it was extremely necessary.
And you describe your grandfather's treatment of you as punishment. Was it always punishment, or was it sometimes? Punishment
for that he was... I think my grandfather got sicker as I became a child. I don't know.
Was he seducing you? Was he taking you downstairs and let's go have our little secret fun?
No, it was really violent.
It was violent?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's even worse.
Yeah. He was extremely violent. And I think they pick a kid, and I'm not really sure why, but I feel like I was that kid for him.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
Jesus. And how has this impacted your adult life?
Well, my first marriage, I married my father, who was a really great guy to the outside world, and, everybody loved him, which was my father. And my father did great things for like the community. He was always doing fundraisers. He was always trying to help everybody else, but he had a really hard time helping his own family. And so I married my dad, and the man I married was an alcoholic as well. And one day I just realized that actually he had said to me, we should start having kids. And the first thing that came to my mind was like, I can't have kids with you. And then I spiraled down to like, but you're married to him. And what, you know, it just kind of spiraled into this final decision that I shouldn't be married to him, basically. So I got divorced.
How long did that last?
We were together for about 7 years. He was a survivor as well. So we kind of connected on that. And that's never, I don't think, a good base for a relationship, especially if the two people haven't done the work. And at that time, neither one of us had done the work.
Have you seen therapists?
I had seen a therapist, but, you know, therapy is really tricky because there's not many therapists that are good. And there's not many therapists that know how to deal with complex trauma survivors. And so I think that that's something that's really lacking in the system and in our world. And that's a big part of why people don't get better. Not saying every therapist is like that, but I've seen my fair share of them. And so I got divorced, and then I met my current husband on a movie. And that's kind of where I feel like I started to believe in God because it had been so thrown in my face as a kid because we were raised so strict. And like, for instance, at my grandfather's funeral, every single one of his children got up and said, one of my aunts said that my grandfather was like Jesus Christ. And another one of my aunts said something like, please, like, always guide us with your hands. I mean, it was such a interesting thing to bear witness to, but then also as an adult to look back and think, oh my gosh, how fucked up our whole family was, and what one person, what he was able to do to all of us, him and his wife, were able to do to all of us to get us to a place where we're sitting and worshiping him in this way and calling him Jesus Christ. That fucked with me for a really long time. And so I met my second husband, who I really wasn't, I'm surprised that I was able to stay in a relationship with him because he was so healthy and I was still really struggling, but I did it. So I don't know if it was God or what, but yeah.
And that is...
We're still together. We've been together for 15 years, and I have a daughter who's 11 now.
What helped you the most, the psychedelics or finding a good therapist, or what?
When my daughter was born, it changed everything. Like, you know, in that instant when you have a baby and you're a mother, and everything like flashed in front of me, like how in the world did my mother let these horrific things happen to me when I looked at my baby? Thank you. Thanks. I do feel like she was the catalyst to me really wanting to start to heal. And as every age, you know, when I had her, I was terrified. I had all of these not normal things happen to me. Every day I thought she was going to die. I thought she was going to be taken away from me. I didn't deserve to have her. She had cancer. She was going to, like, something was, and it was really, really intense, like really overwhelming. I couldn't I couldn't breastfeed her. I did, but I couldn't because, which no one really talks about either, I would have flashbacks every time I breastfed her. So I could feel her anxiousness because she could feel mine, and it was something that should have been so beautiful that he took away from me. That was really hard. And he had given me herpes when I was 8. So when I was pregnant, because of the hormones, I was like, I had an outbreak all the time. So like I couldn't take medicine for it, obviously. So, you know, like wanting to enjoy something that is such a miracle, I wasn't able to enjoy fully because of him. And then I couldn't have her naturally because of that, because they could go blind if you have an outbreak. And so I didn't. I had a C-section. And so it just felt like every time I turned around, it was like him just reminding me that he still had a hold of me. And that made me really mad. And I was like, I can't go through my daughter's life like this. I can't let her, she's always going to have a mom who has this story. But I don't want her to grow up having a mom who didn't heal from her story. So I've worked really hard to not be that mom.
Takes a lot of courage for you to do what you did.
Thanks. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way, but I let my mom around her for the first 5 years of her life. And then little things started happening within my family system because of how we were raised. And it started affecting my daughter, and it was instant for me. I was done. I walked away from everybody.
That's really what you have to do, isn't it?
Yeah. In situations like mine where, you know, I think there's so much talk these days about like toxic people and cutting people off, and some are valid and some are just the dialogue that people seem to be contagious at the moment. But for somebody like me, in order to save, and I do through psychedelic work, I do believe that when you come from generational abuse, which I obviously did, and God knows what happened to my grandfather, or, you know, to get him to become the person he was, that there is a person in the lineage that was born to do something about it, and I do believe that that was me. And it's a gift I wouldn't give back.
Yeah, you're definitely breaking the cycle.
Yeah.
By doing this. Do you know your grandfather's story, what his childhood was like?
I know one thing that people used to say when there was a certain uncle that would come around, he would hide under the sink. So I'm sure that he was abused.
I'm sure there was something.
I'm sure there was something. My grandfather was also extremely... So when he died, he left confession letters. Like, he confessed everything that he did.
He did.
Mm-hmm. And my grandmother found them all. And this is the story I was told. I was obviously alive at the time, but I was told through my mother. My grandmother called my aunt. Your father left all these confession letters, and she burned them.
She burned them?
Mm-hmm.
Jesus.
Yeah. He had confession letters. He had pictures of naked kids, like Polaroid pictures of naked kids with their heads cut off. He had this like crawl space where he like put all of this stuff. he was definitely extremely ill.
And your grandmother kind of protected him.
My grandmother protected him, and she was also abusive as well. I think, well, I know there was many stories I was told about my childhood that from my mother that you want to believe. And one of them was that I was like such a klutz when I was a kid. And it's really ironic because I'm actually extremely physically gifted. But that was kind of the story. Like, things were always happening to me. My leg was broken when I was 1.5, and I cracked my head open on the fireplace when I was 4. And all of these just really, I have an 11-year-old. There hasn't been, and of course things happen as kids. Kids fall, they break their arm, things happen. That was not the case in my family. In one of my psychedelic journeys, it was like as soon as the medicine started kicking in, and it's so interesting how hopefully it gets legalized because it will save people's lives. Like, I truly believe that.
It's MDMA?
MDMA, if it's done in the right way, there's a lot of people that are not doing it in the right way. I have a doctor who I work with one-on-one. We do therapy beforehand.
You're recommending doing it through a professional?
Oh, 100%.
Not just...
Yeah, the people that go out into the forest with some friends, it's a spiritual journey, and it's something that my therapist and I will talk about. Okay, what are your intentions for this journey? What are you feeling like you want to get out of it? And we go through all of that for 2 months, and then she's with me in the journey the whole day, and then we do integration afterwards for months after. And that's like, it's almost like it feels like it needs to be prescribed, where you go through something in order to get to experience the medicine in the proper way. And one of my journeys, I just kept seeing like this fireplace, and it took me a really long time to kind of start having the memory of what happened to me, and also what was told to me happened to me, which was that I tripped and hit my head on the fireplace. And it wasn't that at all. And it was a story that I had told myself over and over, but it never actually made sense to me. It never made sense where I still have a scar to this day, and it's, 40 years later. But that my grandmother grabbed me by the hair and smashed me into the fireplace. And then she flipped me over and she said, "You're not so pretty now, are you?" I've never told that in an interview. And it just it's so sick because my grandmother was jealous of me, like a 7-year-old kid. And all I wanted was someone to just be safe. But nobody was. And if I hadn't done these journeys, these memories would have never surfaced for me. And I And you're living them out anyway in your daily life. Like, they're in here, they're stuck in your frozen state. So if you don't, there's a point in the process, I think, where I got to a point where I was like, okay, enough. Like, I don't want to remember anymore. I don't want to know. But I don't feel that way anymore, because I think that gives, like, my inner child, it doesn't give her the safety that she needs, because, and my thing always is with her, like, I have conversations with her daily. If there's something you need to show me, like, I'm here to see it. Like, I can be that person now for you that you never had your whole life. And we live in such, like, a traumatized world. There's so much evil, and I've seen it and I've lived it. And it's the only reason I share my story, is because I know that I'm not the only one that's been through things like this.
You're definitely not. It's just wonderful to see somebody who was able to figure out that their family was the problem, and you did the right things to protect your child.
Yeah. She's definitely... There was an interesting thing that happened with her. She has been my biggest teacher. My God. Like, if I didn't have her, I would still be in a relationship with my family. 1,000,000%. She probably, like, 4 years ago came up to me and she's like, Mommy, she's very, like, earthy and grounded, and, like, wouldn't even put on a pair of shoes if she didn't have to. And she's just so opposite of me in the sense of, well, I'm still figuring out who I am. So I'll just say that. I think I was made into this person. So I'm trying to undo it all so I can figure out who my actual true self is, right? And so I got attached to material things because my grandmother was very much, like, all about beauty and, like, having your makeup on and your heels and, like, all the things. And so I got attached to that because that's what I thought showed that you were important or that you meant something. And so my daughter said, I want to get some plants for my room. And I was like, we are absolutely not. I always hated indoor plants. I had no idea why. I was just like, I didn't understand why you brought dirt into the house. It was, like, such a bizarre thing for me. And I had a very intense reaction to her when she's like, Mom, I want to get a plant for my room. And I was like, absolutely not. You're not getting a plant. And she just kind of looked at me and walked away. And I was like, whoa, Kim, that was really intense and silly. She asked for a plant. Like, what is this about? And I was about to do a journey, like, 2 weeks after this happened. And so I talked to my doctor about it, and I said, yeah, I don't know why. So if there's something that's meant to, like, come up, I would really welcome to know, like, is this something, like, from my trauma, or, like, what is this? So we went into the journey, and memory that I always had is that I fell into, my grandparents had this, like, massive cactus in their house because everybody does. Like, it's very bizarre. And that I had fallen into it was a story I was told. Like, I fell into it, and I remember, like, I fell into it backwards, and I had all the stickers in me, and it was super painful. And my grandfather was the one that everyone went to fix everything. He was the one that would have the tweezers in his Swiss Army knife to sit there and, like, pull each. So I remember just staying silent about it because I didn't want to be locked in a room with him for however long it took him to do whatever he was going to do. So I didn't say anything to anybody. And in my journey, I saw him push me into the plant. And everything just made sense. I was like, yeah, of course, this is why you don't want to have this in your house. Like, it was such a deep thing. And so after my journey and a week later, I just said to my daughter, I took her to the plant store and she's got like about 70 plants in her room now.
Good for you.
And they're everywhere. But it was such a moment for me to realize I was about to like take away like her authentic self, something that was like so pure inside of her, to want to be connected to the earth because of my shit. And I work every day to try to not do that to her and let her be her without stifling her with my trauma, which isn't always easy. But I'm definitely trying my best.
What connections have you made between your family, your childhood, and what you've been through in becoming a stunt woman?
Oh.
Are there any?
So many. I always say I feel like, stunt people and like fighters and kind of, MMA, UFC, all of that sort of, type of jobs that we take on, that we all have had trauma. I mean, I feel like 100% it is connected. I feel like if you've had a really like good, loving life, you don't sort of wake up in the morning and be like, okay, I'm gonna go do a car hit today. I'm so excited, and I'll do it 10 times if I have to, and I don't care if I'm cut and bleeding and all of the things, and because my body never felt like mine. And so when I felt most alive was when I was injured. Or in pain. I shouldn't say like necessarily like injured, but like bruised, or like I could feel something that was like something I could feel as a car hitting me, or, jumping through a plate of glass, or hitting the ground, or getting ratcheted into a wall. Like all of those things I could feel and know that they were real, where everything else felt like something I couldn't reach and I couldn't grab onto.
That's interesting. And looking back at your decision to become a stunt woman, do you look at it as like, that was a product of my childhood abuse, or something you regret, or something you're proud of?
I'm really proud of my life. I do think that becoming a stunt woman definitely, like the heart of it did come from my trauma, for sure. I also think it helped me learn more about myself, because it's not only the physical things that you could do. You're dealing with like a lot of men on set with really big egos, and my dad was so hardcore growing up with us. Like, his like staple was like, you're a Marine, we don't cry, we don't have emotions, we don't have feelings, and that worked really well for me at work. And nobody could really fuck with me. And so, I think you can live in a place where you are the victim, where I can say all these horrific things happened to me and I feel bad for myself. And yeah, there are times where I do feel sorry for myself, but they're very short-lived, and I'm more really proud of myself. And I think that our lives are what they are. I do think that we pick them before we come into this world. I do think that we're here to learn a lesson, and whether we take the opportunity to learn that lesson is where all of the healing and all of the learning really lies, because we could go either way. Like, I could for sure have been a heroin addict on the side of the road, and
for sure, most people do, probably.
Most people do.
Start
and one therapist that I went to said that to me when I was probably about 25, and I told her my story, and I only had half of the story at that time, and she said, "You're lucky you're not dead from a heroin overdose with what you've been through." And I walked out of her office and I was like, "Fuck you, that's not me."
What are you proudest of in your life? You have a lot of things to be proud of.
Being a mom.
Yeah. And being a good mom.
Being a good mom. Being the mom that I always wanted and never had, and being able to overcome everything I did and still show up to her the best that I can. And I'm not perfect, and I certainly, things have happened that, you know, obviously I'm extremely like psychotically overprotective.
That's understandable.
She won't be having sleepovers ever. But just looking at her and how really simple it is to just be a good parent if you let your child lead you, because they are the purest form of life. And if you can get out of your own way and figure your shit out, it's the gift that she's going to be able to have a child if she chooses. And then our lineage is forever changed.
Forever. And one day you'll be able to look at her and be so proud of what you did at this young, you know, at her young age, to protect her from what you went through.
Yeah.
Whereas your family, your parents, your grandparents could never be proud of what they did.
No. And it was bleeding through. It bleeds through in different ways, right? Maybe my mom wasn't sexually abusive, but she was abusive in her own way.
I mean, I would think there would have been some way for somebody, your mom, your dad, somebody to figure, your grandmother certainly should have see what was going on, figure out what was happening.
Well, that's what I've come to terms with now, is that they all knew exactly what was happening.
And did nothing.
Yes. My aunt, who I write about in the book, who was my doorway to where I am, she was the oldest of the 6. And when she was 9, she went to my grandmother and she said, "Daddy's touching me." And my grandmother, from the story I was told, went to my grandfather, and my grandfather said, "No, that wasn't what was happening. I was just pulling the covers up." And that was the end of that. And I dedicated my book to her because she was the first one to speak up. And she was ignored and denied and called a liar, basically. And then she lived with this, with everybody's pain. She became like everybody went to her for help. She was like, I looked up to her so much. She was such a beautiful soul. But in my healing process, I also had to look at the part she played in what happened to me too, because she knew who he was. And he was doing things actively. Like I'm pretty sure my grandmother's sister and my grandfather were having an affair. He would expose himself to her at parties, she told me later. Like, he was very, in some ways, I feel like he wanted to be caught. In some ways, I feel like he was being so outward about it. And it was like, well, yeah, everybody knows, but no one's doing anything.
He's getting away with it.
And he's getting away with it over and over again.
This is your aunt, right?
My aunt.
Did she help you later in life to handle this differently? Change your direction?
The interesting thing is about 20 years ago, we all started writing a book together, all of us.
Oh, really?
My mother, my aunt, me, my siblings. And the ironic thing about all of it was the minute everyone started having kids, everybody was like, nope, I'm not doing this. It's going to, one of my sisters said to me when I got my book deal, because I felt like at that time I was like, the people pleaser of the family, amongst many other things. I have to make sure that this is okay with everybody, that I'm going to write this book. And I called one of my sisters, who's much younger than me, and we did not have the same life. We didn't grow up in the same house, actually. And she said, "You're going to ruin the children's lives by writing this book." And I think that might have been the last time I talked to her.
You saved your children's lives by doing this.
Because to me, it's always been the opposite. To me, all of their kids will grow up and have so many questions. And I hope that my voice to my nieces and nephews can be something for them at some point. Some explanation.
Sure it will be. You should be very proud.
Thank you.
Kimberly. I wish more people understood how important having the courage to do this kind of stuff is and change the family course.
And change other people's lives too. Incest is such a dark thing to A, be capable of it, but B, what it does to families and the silence it creates for children. Most people don't come out of it.
Do you ever tell other people that have been through these things? I'm sure you get contacted by a lot of people who've been through it.
I do, yeah.
What do you tell them?
It's really difficult to connect with everybody, and it's I'm not a therapist, and everyone's at their own level of where they're at with it all.
Yeah, but that's what books and social media are good for.
Yes, and so I feel like my book was my gift to all of the adult children or children that have suffered something like this. Like, if I had this book when I was 15, it would have completely changed my life. Because in family systems like this, that's all you know is like what's happening in here. And there's no language for what it really is. And once I started getting the language for it through the doctors I've been so lucky to connect with, everything started making so much sense to me.
Is your grandmother still around?
No.
Your mom is still around, though?
Yeah.
Who do you wish from your family you wish you could say something to now?
So my father died a year ago. And that kind of spoke volumes to me too, because nobody called me to tell me he died. Not even my mom. One of my sister's husbands called my husband, which is no way to find out that your father's dead.
Have you been ostracized by your family? Mm-hmm. Great. Families suck.
Yeah, my family sucks. That's for sure.
Some families suck.
So I wasn't, told where the funeral, I wasn't told anything. I wasn't welcome. I wasn't invited, which was fine with me, because for me, my family's all a show. It's all an act. It's not real. Nothing's real happening there. And so I did a journey. He died in April of last year, and I did a journey in August. And my biggest intention was, if it's meant to happen, like, I really want to connect with my dad. And it was like such a beautiful moment, because he just showed up, and it's very hard to explain if you haven't been through it. It's such like an incredible spiritual, and I just could feel his like shame. It was so heavy, like, and he was just crying and crying and crying. And he just sat at my feet and just kept saying how sorry he was. And he just said, I didn't know, Kim, what was happening to you, but I wasn't there, which is why I didn't know. Like, he was saying he wasn't there for me as a father. He wasn't present as a father, so he didn't know. And so we went through this whole like beautiful thing with my doctor and my dad, and I have a lot of peace around my father now.
That's
which
great.
Couldn't have happened in this world. And I knew that. My dad was too traumatized. And so my mom is too traumatized. And it's really difficult to grieve somebody who's alive, which is what I've had to do with my mom. And what's so interesting about, you know, things had happened with my mother, and I was finally like, I have to be done. This isn't, I can't hold, I mothered my mother my whole life, and I can't hold this space anymore for her. And so I told her, like, I can't have a relationship with you anymore. And she didn't fight for me. And that was really painful, but then I realized she never fought for me. And so what would make this any different? And she was living near me at the time, and I came home. She has since moved and is living, I believe, with one of my siblings. And I came home, and she had dropped off probably 20 boxes of my entire childhood on my driveway.
Photos or?
Photos, baby teeth, everything, like my wedding photos that were hung up in her home, like literally still in the frame. She just took them down and put them in a box. And it was such a symbolic moment for me, because it was like I never existed in her world.
Is that what it said to you?
That's what it felt like. I never existed. And here she was just going here, and now you really don't exist. And now I have nothing of yours, and you...
Because it might have been that she still cared and wanted, but just couldn't.
My mom was incapable. I also think my mom was starting to sense that I was having more and more memories. I was sharing more with her as I started remembering.
Oh.
I shared with her that I said, Mom, I remember that you walked in. And her answer to me was, without even skipping a beat, I'm not surprised. And so I think for my mom, because she is not connected to herself whatsoever, the more I was remembering, the more I was healing, the more terrified she got of what her life was, what my life was, what I was uncovering, and she couldn't be around it.
When she said she's not surprised, what does that mean, do you think?
She said, I'm not surprised. It was always very confusing to me because I always checked on you girls.
So she wasn't surprised at what?
She wasn't surprised that she walked in on him abusing me.
And did nothing?
Yes. And she didn't even ask, like, what and it was such a jolt to me that I think I was speechless. Like, I couldn't even think of what to say in the moment. Now there are so many things I would have said. But she did give me a gift with all of the boxes that she left. And this is what I mean about sitting in victim mode or sitting in, okay, what is this lesson trying to teach me, even when it's fucking horrible. She had left me all of the Mother's Day cards that I wrote her through the years. Probably started when I was 7, when I could write, you know. Every single card started with, Dear Mom, I am so sorry that I'm such a bad child.
Really?
I'm so sorry that you have to deal with me. I'm so sorry. Like, just apologizing for myself over and over and over in every single card I wrote her. And I just thought to myself, my God, if my child ever felt that she needed to apologize to me for who she was, I have fucking failed. Thank you.
Were you even that bad a kid?
No.
No, you probably weren't.
No, I mean, I did things like every kid does.
Every kid, yeah.
No, for what I went through, I was a really good kid. And so that to me was a gift. Those boxes that she left me were a gift. Because I got to connect with little Kimberly and be like, oh my gosh, you've been carrying this for so long. You've been apologizing for who you are when you were a child. No child should ever have to apologize for who they are. Mm-hmm. And she never had a conversation with me about it, you know? Like, there was never like, why would you ever say you're sorry for who? It was just always that I'm obviously not living up to her standards, or I don't even know that she has any, but yeah. You
should be so incredibly proud of so many things.
Thank you.
But especially what you're doing for your daughter.
Thank you.
It's amazing. It's such an amazing story.
Thank you.
Well, Kimberly, thank you for sharing this. I hope it affects and changes so many people that watch it.
Thank you. Me too.
You're amazing.
Thank you.
When I was designing the first Soft White Underbelly book, I realized that there were so many great portraits that weren't going to make it into that book. They just wouldn't fit. And once I saw how well that first book sold, I knew I'd have to design a second book. This second book is finally ready to ship. Like the first one, this book has a collection of some of the best portraits from Soft White Underbelly, accompanied by a quote from that person's interview. This book features another group of Rebecca portraits, as well as a collection of color images of the Whitaker family, and plenty of others. You can order yours for $125 or $150 for a signed copy at softwhiteunderbelly.org. Again, like the first book, once this book is sold out, I will not be printing more of them. The portraits are what Soft White Underbelly is all about, and these two books contain the best of all that work. Thank you for watching.